So, turn my phone off. Okay, if everyone wants to turn their phones off, unless you have a compelling reason not to. Are we recording?
Yes.
We are recording. Hello, hello. Welcome everybody, and thank you all for coming. We do have some new faces here, which is really nice, from as far afield as Southampton and Slovakia, and online, I believe, possibly we'd have somebody from Adelaide, 10:12 in the morning there, so well done them. My name is Catherine Thomas, and I represent Free Speeches Wales and West. We set up last year with the help of Toby Young and his Free Speech Union in London, but we very much run our own show here in Wales. 10 years ago, I'm sure that none of us in this room or watching online would ever have thought we would need to be here tonight listening to a talk like this. None of us would have expected to join a free speech group. Why would you need one in the middle of Cardiff? Britain was one of the freest countries in the world. There was no such thing virtually as a hate crime. The police didn't worry about what people were thinking. And if we had gone to a talk like this, it would have been probably as a thought experiment, an exercise in taking arguments to their logical conclusions, perhaps, and it would have been very interesting and we would have congratulated each other afterwards, but it wouldn't have been essential or even important. There were hints of limits being placed on freedoms. I'm just going to talk about hate crimes very briefly because they are now being used as a great excuse for the police and for other agencies to crack down on free speech, and that includes freedom of expression and lawful protest. In 2012, in this country, the UK, 42,000 hate crimes were recorded. Now, these weren't trivial cases. They weren't to do with hurt feelings. Most involved physical violence, arson, or damage to property. They were mostly to do with race and religion. 6 years later, in 2018, the figure had more than doubled to 100,000, so clearly something was changing. But in 2022, the last year of lockdown and the last year the government has provided statistics for us, the number had gone up by another 55%, an unusually high increase, to 155,000, which is amazing when you consider how much time everybody spent harmlessly at home in that year. Over half of these hate crimes were now for public order offences, and that really is to do with thoughts, words and feelings. The most recent public order offence that has caused a bit of a furore in this country was the outrageous case of an autistic girl being dragged off to jail because she said a police officer looked like her lesbian grandmother. Her grandmother is a lesbian. There was nothing wrong with the statement, but the police officer was terribly offended. Now, we can argue whether lockdown was a cause or a symptom or an accelerator of the restrictions on freedoms that we are now beginning to suffer from. But whatever it was, lockdown was a horrendous hint of what a totalitarian, authoritarian future might look like in the UK. So I hope that this isn't going to be a theoretical thought experiment. I hope that we're going to try and think of actual strategies, firstly, that we might adopt as a group that is fighting for freedom of speech in the UK, and the arguments that we might use, but also on a practical level, because I know, Monica, you're very interested in helping small groups and helping small groups to come together. I'm hoping that as a small group ourselves, we are going to pick up some top tips from you as to how to take ourselves forward and join up with other groups and so on. So I'd like everybody in the room and watching online as we go along to think of formulating questions to which we might be able to come up with some practical questions about how we're going to preserve our freedoms, and how we're going to reverse the erosion of the freedoms that have already happened. So Monica, if you want to begin with explaining, I believe you had an interesting experience in Melbourne in 2021, where you ended up spending 22 days in solitary confinement.
Yeah.
How did that come about? Because you don't look like a hardened criminal.
You'd be surprised what criminals look like these days. They don't look like what they used to.
I'm not even going to say anything about Australia.
In terms of what? Oh, we're all prisoners. Okay. Well, I just got to say, I am first generation Australian, so I am not from the UK. But yes, we do have it. We might actually have a bit of a prison mentality in our characteristics. Maybe that's why the COVID lockdowns worked so well. Who knows? So, do you want me to just do my talk, or do you want me to answer your questions like as I go? How would you like me to do it?
Do you want to just give a sort of overview of what happened to you in this one instance, because
Sure.
this is your big story, but you had actually already created a small organization, hadn't you, before you?
Yeah, so I'll go through it. Yeah, I'll do the back. So basically it was, who here already knows like a lot about my story? Perfect. I don't feel silly in repeating everything then. Great. And who here came from my email or promotions or from hers? Anyway, that was a silly question because I said both of the answers in the same question, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so basically, my name is Monica Smit. I'm from Australia. And as you know, Melbourne, especially in Australia, was the worst lockdown place in the world.
We don't know anything very much about exactly what happened in Australia or Melbourne. I think one of the things about lockdown is that a lot of people became very inward looking. I don't remember following international events actually that closely. You might have thought that we would, apart from China, obviously we were all very interested in what was happening in China, but I don't think, we didn't seem to get a lot from the Australian television companies.
Well, that's why I'm here. So basically it was August 2020 and we had been in lockdown for maybe 3 months at that point. And I just felt like I wanted to try something. I was at this point still had respect for the police, respect for authorities. I was brought up to be a tax-paying citizen. I've always had a good, a normal job, a normal sort of situation. So I thought of a way of doing a protest online, which, didn't break any COVID restrictions or anything like that. So I did an online protest and I promised people that I would collate their comments into like a pie graph or a diagram and send it to all our members of parliament. This is when I thought that members of parliament actually cared what people, said. But, that changed. But anyway, I had 4,500 comments. I had 1,500 live viewers. I've never had that many comments or views on any video since. And no one knew who I was. I had no idea what I was doing. I still don't really. But I just smashed together this quite limited website, started a Facebook page, and just did this event. And then and it went bonkers. And then 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, I somehow found myself in a big bus that was mocking the Premier, Daniel Andrews. You've probably heard his voice. So basically it was his face and he was like, obviously not moving, but you could imagine. And it had, sack Dan Andrews, so fire Dan Andrews. And now it was full lockdown. So you weren't allowed to leave your house. You weren't, but this bus was my taxi driver and I was a journalist. So we drove around Victoria. And that's when I got the media attention and things like that. And I think that's when Daniel Andrews probably said, we need to do something about this girl. So that's really how it all started. I didn't plan it. I didn't know what I was doing. That's what happened. So from there, obviously we did lots of protests, but I was a journalist. So I had loopholes on how to promote protests. And I would promote the poster and I would say, I am going to report on this protest, so it was like promoting it, but not saying to go. And then I kind of got sick of playing the game. And I just said, you know what, go to the bloody protest because you need to. And that's when I got arrested. So it was actually today, the 31st of August, it marks the 2-year anniversary of the day I got arrested. And I didn't go to prison because of the charge. Now, the charge is incitement. So, for example, if I encourage you to do an armed robbery, I'm also culpable because I coerced you into doing it. But in this case, imagine COVID restrictions are only punishable by a fine. They're not jailable offenses. So in this case, it's so I got charged with incitement because I was inciting people to break COVID restrictions. It's kind of like if we were driving in a car and we parked in a no parking zone and you got a ticket, I got criminally charged. So that's how insane it actually is. But they found a loophole in the criminal system in Australia. This is what they were using to silence people. They didn't need to have enough evidence to charge you. Okay. They should have, but they didn't. All they cared about was giving you bail conditions that would shut you up. That's it. So that was the whole strategy. So I got arrested. They gave me bail conditions, and I won't go through all of them, but the personal ones were I had to stay at home from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. every day. I was on bail for 2 years. Okay. Clearly I couldn't
So
sign
for
that.
2 years, you wouldn't have been allowed to go out in the evening.
Well, I probably would have been able to appeal those bail conditions, but I'll get to that. But the ones that I really would never have signed was, so I had a website at the time that was obviously important to the people because I'm not gloating here. I'm just explaining the situation. It was getting like 50 to 70,000 views a week. So clearly people needed whatever I was doing, right? They wanted me to delete everything off the website that was in opposition to the COVID restrictions. So not encouraging people to break COVID restrictions, which would make sense based on the charge, but anything that was literally just speaking against the COVID narrative, for example. Now, at the time, I was also the vice president of a political party, which is in opposition to the government. So how could I possibly continue my role if I'm not allowed to post things about that? I also had 8 staff, so they would have all lost their job. The entire website was against the COVID narrative, so that would have been the end, right? And it had to be within 24 hours of signing the bail condition because they knew that I would have been able to appeal the bail conditions. So they were clever. But the worst one of all was I could not speak against the COVID restrictions, full stop, even in the privacy of my own home. Not that they can police that, but that was part of the restrictions. So what they didn't count on was that I did not sign the bail conditions and decided to go to prison instead. Now, I want to say that I was the perfect candidate for this role. I call it a role because I think I was called to do that and I answered the call. But I have a very supportive family. I have no young children, for example. I didn't have a job that I had to go to, for example. So if I didn't do this, like who else would have? I was the perfect candidate to do it. And I want you to know that I'm not more special or more courageous than anyone because everyone has a different role in life, you know, and you can be really courageous in your own private life and no one knows about it. I actually was blessed in a way to get some public gratification for what I did. So I'm really grateful for having done that. And to be honest, it was kind of a break because I was working really hard. And I think
can I ask what the I mean, we all like a holiday. But what were the conditions?
Look, I've stayed in worse hostels, to be honest, you know, back in when I was younger. The difference is I couldn't leave, obviously. And you do get treated like a dog.
Did you have an ensuite?
No, it's all in the one room. I could literally like touch the toilet from my bed. So no, it wasn't an ensuite. It was just all in the same room. It was about 4 meters by 3 meters. Do you guys do meters?
Were you allowed? I mean, I've very little experience of what it was.
I could only pace 4 times before turning around.
Did you have plenty of reading material?
No, I didn't have any books or TV for the first 12 days. But that was great because I wrote the end of my book. So jokes on them. So no, because, you know, TV can be really distracting anyway. But, you know, with what happened with prison, I have a saying that, like, you know, you should never force a publicity stunt. But if it happens, you should make the most of it. And I tell you what, I have absolutely made the most of it. I'm still running this story 2 years later. And I find it quite hilarious that they actually wanted to shut me up and it's done the exact opposite. I wouldn't be here without that 22 days in prison. That was a tiny price to pay for now the experiences that I get to have and the people that I get to meet. So it is a story that, like, you know, when the mainstream media, you know, write negative pieces and stuff, it always ends up helping us. Like, whoever's advising them is really stupid. They should actually ignore us. That would be their best policy, but they can't help themselves because they're so arrogant. So I find it quite funny. And, you know, because of them, I was able to network globally. And like I said, that's why I'm here. So I, like I said, I'm really grateful that I was able to do that. But it also showcased at that time what the government and what our fellow brothers and sisters in uniform are willing to do to follow bad orders. You know, because I am so clean looking, you know, it really did showcase, you know, what they were willing to do, and it really backfired on them, and I thought that was pretty hilarious. Now, later on, we won the bail conditions, so they took all those bail conditions away, so we won. And then when they tried to do the same strategy with other people with platforms, it didn't work. They were only able to give them the amended bail conditions. So I set sort of a precedent by doing that 22 days. Later on, you're going to love this one. So about 6 months later, I pled not guilty. And then they thought they would just, you know, just try a bit deeper. So they got a warrant signed by a magistrate. I mean, I used to be surprised by these things, but now I'm not, because they're paid by the government. So of course they're not going to go against the government. But anyway, signed by the magistrate in a democratic country to force me to give password access to everything on my phone that they still had in their custody. I'm talking Google Maps, Google Docs, Google Drive, all my admin emails, all these private emails that people had been emailing my organization, all my staff's private emails, the entire database. I had over 100,000 people on the database. Some of them had addresses, like physical addresses, because they were volunteers or something like that.
Can I ask how long they had your phone for?
They had my phone.
So
I only just got them back 2 weeks ago.
Months? Well,
2 years.
Years.
2.5 years. I'm not touching those phones. That's for sure. Because
they're bugged.
No, they never got into them. That was the point. So they wanted me to sit in a room with them and literally sit down with them and like do forget password. Could you imagine that scene? It would be hilarious. Anyway, so I had
that's quite shocking to me, because I think in this country they have to they can keep your property for a reasonable amount of time, like a day.
No, but it's because but it was still going. It was still going. I only finished the court cases. No, that it made sense. Nothing makes sense. Okay. But anyway, so I had two choices. I could either plead guilty to the incitement charge and not have to do the passwords, or I would give them the passwords, or I tried to fight the warrant and I lost about £50,000 in legal fees. So I just thought, you know what? There's no way I'm giving them that data, obviously. So I just decided to say no and see what happened. So I called them up and I said, it was an email, sorry. I'm not giving you the passwords, but if you need, because that's breach of bail, because it's a new criminal charge, which is breaching your bail. So I could have gone back to prison for 3 months, no questions asked, right? And so I was like, if you're going to arrest me again, that's fine. Just let me know so I can be in more comfortable clothes than last time. And 2 days later, they dropped the charges. So it was just an intimidation tactic. And I'm not telling you this story to gloat. I'm telling you because sometimes, and you need to evaluate in your own life, but sometimes you're getting tested. And in my opinion, this is a big statement, but doing the right thing is always the right thing to do. You can't do bad things to justify good outcomes. It just doesn't work like that. And once you let go of your integrity, it's a slippery slope. We've all seen the movies, you know, like, oh, one more drug deal. It never ends there. So for me, it's black and white because I can be. And I think next time, if there's any sort of lockdowns, a lot more people are willing to do a lot more than they used to. So can I go on? That's pretty much it. My two main messages right now is potentially not in line with what you're saying in terms of strategizing and things like that, because actually I think now is the time. This is my personal opinion. You can totally come back at me on this. My personal opinion is that now is not the time to wake people up because the crisis isn't big enough. It's not in their faces. They're not feeling enough pain. Like, you would have to spend a lot of energy to wake one person up, for example. I believe now is the time to prepare for when it's going to be really easy to wake them up. So for example, if there is climate change lockdowns, if they do bring back masks, do you know how much our groups have grown since the vaccine mandates? We don't know who they are because there was no crisis. So they're all silent now. And all the people that were silent back during COVID because they were too scared, they won't be silent again. So I would say my strategy is now is the time to recuperate and to prepare for when the next wave of tyranny happens. And then we can wake up millions of people with hardly any effort. They won't, generally, I would say, people don't change unless they are pushed against the wall. And you could have the best campaign in the world right now. And if you publish it now, it won't work because there isn't enough pain. But if you prepare that campaign, right, have it all ready, have all the paperwork ready, have all the pamphlets print out 100 a week until you've got 10,000. Then when the pain comes, boom, we do it, right? And because, you know, I think we need to let go of the concept that we're going to win. We aren't going to win. They are going to lose, right? So when they make a mistake, when they do things too early, we're going to jump on that and we're going to win that battle. Because when COVID happened, we weren't ready at all. And look what we achieved. We may have prevented the one world government. Maybe that was supposed to be it. I don't know for sure. But imagine if we didn't do anything, you know, and look at what we've created now. We've got, you know, 25 people in Cardiff on a Thursday night, and
summer holidays,
and there's no imminent crisis in our, well, there's lots of crises kind of looming, but there's not the lockdowns and the things like that. If there was lockdowns right now, you'd have 200 people in this room. Well, you wouldn't be able to fit them. But the point is that without that global imminent crisis to bond us, everything we do is just not going to be as effective. And so our energy is going to be kind of not wasted, but it's going to be spread too thin. During COVID, you know, I started Reignite Democracy Australia in August. So it was the first big organization in Australia to start up. And we were running after everything. We reacted to everything. We were running around like headless chickens. And these politicians and globalists were laughing their faces off at us because they knew none of it was going to work, right? But now we've learned, when I say not work, it worked in a lot of ways, but it didn't change policy or change necessarily. But now we know how to focus. We know how to pick our battles. For example, I'll use the LGBT situation, right? In Victoria, we were really proud of ourselves. We prevented one we prevented one drag queen story time from happening. And the next week, 10 happened. So my point is that you put all this energy into stopping one, and then there's 10 that come, you know. So there is a saying that I love at the moment, which is don't interfere with your enemy when they're in the process of destroying themselves. I think to some extent, we actually need to watch the show a little bit. Some people are going to get hurt. Some children are going to be mutilated. But to be honest, if a parent is going to bring their 2-year-old to a drag queen story time, can we save that child? You know, and so we can't save everyone, you know. And so we might need to. Do you want to mute that person? There's someone who's like making sound. Hang on, I'm going to mute them for you. I think I did it. Yeah, so I think that we kind of need to wait for the right opportunity to use our energy instead of running around like crazy. Now, for example, the disinformation bill, which is on topic with what you're talking about, like hate crimes, and you know, these disinformation bills, they're coming in here too, right? Do you guys know?
I'm not up with the Australian legislation.
No, it's happening all over the world. So in New Zealand, Australia, Ireland, UK, they're talking about these new misinformation bills that will basically, if you say something against the climate change narrative, it's basically going to be hate speech. And, you know, Twitter will be fined if they don't delete your comment. It's really, really crazy. Now, you could look at that and be like, oh my gosh, like we're going to lose everything. Let's start a petition. Let's do this. Or you could just look at it and go, whatever, I'll stand on the street with a board if I have to, if that's what I have to do, you know, because they're so powerful right now and they have so much media control that even if we did a petition wasn't there a petition with over 300,000 signatures about keep cash alive, and the Rishi, whatever his name is, yeah, he's just like, we're just going to ignore that. So all this energy goes into that, and it's like just nothing. So now when I see it, when I personally see a headline like the disinformation, blah, 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 I honestly imagine the parliament is a circus. I literally think about this in my head, and all the politicians are clowns with funny makeup on and big noses, and they're just running around pumping their own chests and showing, look what I did, or look what I did. And it just makes it all a bit of a joke instead of being afraid of it. And it might get worse before it gets better. But sometimes it has to get worse before it gets better.
I'll just ask, to the best of my knowledge at the moment, these issues of disinformation and misinformation in the UK seem to be being limited to social media. The people who are threatening it are social media and also the mainstream media, is there anyone in the audience
that is what it is.
Who knows of any? I'm not aware of any bills going through our parliament at the moment. I don't think so. Okay. But in Australia, you have actual pending legislation, do you?
It's about to be debated, and it's hilarious because the mainstream media and the politicians.
We're not quite there yet.
Oh, won't be long. The politicians and the mainstream media are exempt from it. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's just hilarious. But the good thing is it's actually waking people up. That's what I mean. They're going to end up getting very desperate. The more confident we become, and I can say with authority that we are pretty ready. And why I say that is because I've had 25 events all over Europe. Like, that's not huge, right? But you that's a good enough ratio to get an idea of what people are like. Norway, Sweden, France, Netherlands, like tons of different cultures, tons of different ages, and hardly anyone is scared anymore. And that is going to annoy the absolute bejesus out of them. If we are as a collective, I don't know necessarily how these things work, but if as a collective we can actually believe that we are ready to face whatever happens, that sort of energy or whatever, it will actually resonate, and it might freak them out and they might act too quickly. It's called the acceleration process. In war, for example, you can actually try to coax the enemy into doing what they want to do earlier, because if they had 10 years to bring in the digital ID or the digital currency, they might succeed because they'll make it voluntary, and then they'll make it, but remember, these people are humans too, and anyone can make a big website and make it look like they're doing really, really well, or make it look like they've got 100 employees, but there's one person in the basement of their mum's house working on this website that looks really, really fancy. My point is that for them to bring in digital ID or digital currency, it's a huge job. And I think they're trying to fear us into thinking that they can do it, but I actually don't think they can, unless they have 20 years to do it slowly. But some of these big players are getting old, and I think that they're going to want to see the fruits of their labor. So I actually this is me personally, I don't want to sound naive because I know it's going to be bad, okay? But I am personally excited to see what they do. I want them to push us too hard, because that's when, like an orange with orange juice, you've got to squeeze the orange, right? Diamonds, pressure, right? And I say this because in Australia, in Melbourne, we had the worst lockdown in the world. It was just horrific, and I don't even need to go into it. It was just horrific.
Do you think it's worse than the lockdown in New Zealand, which
it was longer,
or Canada?
Yes.
Because we one thing that did come up in the news here comparatively a lot was possibly just because Mr. Trudeau is so very photogenic, we heard a lot about Canada.
Yeah.
But we did get the impression that actually Ardern's New Zealand it was my impression that was the worst worst.
Well, look, it's not a competition anyone wants to win. So I'm not going to fight for that role.
We don't want to get into the victim competition.
It's more Victoria. It's not Australia as a whole.
Okay.
Because actually Victoria was completely different to the other states. So
right.
In Western Australia, it was different to Adelaide, different to even in Queensland, which is north. They've got so much vitamin D there that they think better, I think. And so even they couldn't lock them down. They're whatever, I'm going to go sailing or do whatever I'm going to do.
What was so uniquely terrible about the lockdown?
It was the longest lockdown in the world, for one.
So did you have many breaks? Well, what we had was if memory serves me correctly, it was supposed to be 2 weeks, and it was 2 months, and it was 4 months, and
we had 320 days of lockdown. We had 320 days of lockdown.
So you almost had an entire.
No, I mean there was breaks in between, but our premier, for example, Valentine's Day. I don't know if that's big here. I'm sure it is commercially. It's big everywhere. He woke up on Valentine's Day morning. We had just opened up last week. He woke up on Valentine's Day morning and said that we were locking up at 6 p.m. that night. Can you imagine how many restaurants would have had all their bookings, the flower shops, the weddings? And he didn't give a flying. He loved the control of it. And it was that psychological, you couldn't plan birthday parties, you couldn't plan weddings, you couldn't plan to die because no one can come to your funeral.
No, we had something in Wales, and for the people in England who are here today, I think that Wales did have a slightly worse lockdown than England.
I heard it was longer.
There was one occasion. Can anyone remember? It wasn't Valentine's, but it was a date that was very, very important. And as you say, it was almost deliberately left till the very last moment. The restaurants had ordered the food, the pubs had got the extra barrels of beer. There was something happened.
Wasn't that the slap lockdown just before Christmas?
Sorry,
before Christmas.
Gareth, can you?
No, sorry.
Sorry, we'll come back to you, Louise. Don't worry.
Okay.
We'll take questions from everyone.
Yeah, she's trying to help. Christmas. She was trying to help. Yeah, Christmas.
Was it Christmas? Was it a Christmas thing? But the point was, they could have said that this was going to happen at any time, but they waited until the restaurants and the shops,
well, it was deliberate,
and the bars
yeah,
had ordered all their food, and then you had the spectacle of the barrels of beer being emptied into the gutters and the food being thrown in the bins.
Oh my gosh!
And you know,
what a nightmare!
Yet another wave of restaurants and bars going under, because they essentially that tipped them over the edge into bankruptcy. It's very what's the word,
psychological,
malicious.
Yeah, but my point was not to go back into that trauma, but to say that because Melbourne was the worst lockdown place in the world, we have per capita the most freedom lovers.
Your leader was as dreadful as ours. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Mark Drakeford is also very good at that sort of thing.
But yeah, my point is that because we were pushed to the brink,
yeah,
we have per capita, I believe, the biggest freedom movement in the world. So my point is that when humans are pushed to that limit, it actually brings out somehow the best in them. So, like, for example, the people that you were 3 years ago compared to the person that you are today, who here is would consider themselves a mentally stronger person since COVID, you know?
We've got about half the people in the room putting their hands up.
Oh, more than half. But the point is that it did bring out a lot of important things that needed to be brought out, and never before have so many people been awake to questioning things, you know? And so in some ways, I know that sounds crazy, but I think we should be grateful for what they did. Now, I know everyone has a different story. I know some people have probably died from COVID vaccines or have lost really close relatives or things like that. But overall, as a net positive or gain, I think we have gained a lot more collectively because of COVID. Like, we wouldn't be having this discussion, and we don't know what this would bring, what this is going to bring.
You think that the ailment brought its own cure with it and perhaps strengthened us as a result?
Think of your own life. You know, think of one situation in all of your lives that was the hardest situation in your life. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to bring you back there, but did you learn something amazing from it? Sometimes 3 years later, you're like, oh, that's why that happened. Or do you know what I mean? Generally speaking, it is the worst situations that bring out the best in people. And so instead of being depressed about what happened or what is to happen, we've already decided which side of history we're on, right? There's two choices. We can go down the digital ID, digital currency, slave path if we want to, that's fine. Or we can go on the path that we're already on. Now, I think we've already all chosen that we're going to be on this path, right? So instead of being depressed about it, we may as well be excited, because when things go down again, all the infighting in the freedom movement, all the questions about who's controlled opposition or not, all of that will go away. And everyone will come together and unite like they did back then. I don't know how strong the movement was here, but in Melbourne, it was one of the most beautiful experiences of my entire life. So in some way, I mean, coming together, the protests.
Just so that we know, what was this reaction? Because I'm not sure. I personally didn't really witness any great rebellion.
Because it wasn't. That's my point. The worse it is.
What was the rebellion that you witnessed?
Well, okay.
Or helped bring about?
So,
what form did it take?
For example, there was one protest in Melbourne against one bill called There was 600,000 people on the streets, and we only have 6 million people in the whole state. The state is the size of England, basically. So people had to drive a long way to get there. That is 10% of the entire population. Now, that includes, in that 100% of the population, there's babies, there's retired people, there's disabled people. Then you've got the people that couldn't go, that wanted to go. So let's say that was 40% of the entire population was against that bill. Now, the bill still went through, and that's when I realized democracy was broken, right? But the fact that they were there means a lot. So since then, that was in December 2021, right? Since then, how many people have woken up that we don't know? So many. That's why I'm excited, because it's going to be revolution. And next time, can I just say, if there's a next time, which there probably will be, but I hope there isn't. I'm not trying to fearmonger here. I'm actually doing the opposite. If there's a next time and we protest, then we can't go home if we want a revolution. It doesn't happen. There's a difference between protest and revolution. There was this speech, this 5-minute video. It's on the top of my Facebook page, from a Romanian girl who experienced a revolution in Romania. Now, I don't know exactly the whole history of the revolution itself, but this was really poignant to me. She said, protests are great, but they're not revolutions. Because in protests, you go and you go home. Okay? In a revolution, it doesn't have to be violent, by the way. You go into the mainstream media and you take over the broadcast. You go in, sorry, thank you for your service, but your time is done now. You go and you burn the propaganda books in the streets. You know, you hopefully not violently, but with numbers, you can do these types of things. And there might be an opportunity. I mean, I actually would love to go to one of these shops and get like 200 of these disgusting LGBT books and burn them in the streets.
Yes.
Well, what are they going to do?
I think.
Well, what are they going to do? Make me pay for the books? Okay, I'll pay for the books.
The
Who wants to burn books tomorrow?
Certainly, when it comes
let's
to
go.
books coming, books being given out in schools in Wales, that's something that people feel extremely strongly about. Yes, go on. Let's have the question. We'll have the first question.
On the question, I was just agreeing with that. I think
We're going to go burn books tomorrow.
Well, I think
Okay.
we do need to do something positive.
Yeah.
Because so many people are completely unaware of this.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that strikes me is we don't know if there's going to be another COVID lockdown.
Can't wait.
It's well,
Can't wait.
fingers crossed.
Planned for December.
There was
It was supposed to be September.
There was talk in this spring, in February or March, about a new variant called Arcturus, which was supposed to be the next dreadful thing. Now it went away, but we were coming into summer. There was a vitamin D, as you know, you mentioned earlier. But who knows?
Where?
Arcturus. Yeah, sorry about that.
They brought forward the vaccination program for this autumn in the UK by a couple of weeks because a new variant they're saying is scary.
It was.
It's
There was going to be a new variant. Yeah, it's not Arcturus. This is one of the things, though. In March, Arcturus was going to come and be the new bubonic plague. Well, yeah, it went away. Apparently, there were a few.
Probably because the marketing didn't work.
The marketing didn't work. One thing I noticed is that, as you say, the idea of the pandemics has gone away slightly. I mean, we're not all worrying about Arcturus. We're not talking about Arcturus tonight, for example. But I think that people's patience is running out, and there's a more general spirit of rebellion. This has literally only happened in the past few days, but ULEZ, which stands for Ultra Low Emission Zone in London, the mayor of London has introduced this scheme, which essentially means that people who have the wrong kind of car have to pay £12.50.
Yeah.
I don't know, about 15 Australian dollars probably, or something like that.
Yeah.
Every single day. And when you see pictures on the telly of the people who are being caught up in traffic jams and so on in London, so many of them are white vans and small lorries. People aren't, which obviously they're almost certainly non-compliant. They're having to pay £12.50. They're doing it for their business. These are not people carriers. They're not.
Who forces them to pay
cars.
the £12.50?
The mayor of London and, you know, the surrounding, I don't know, you know, his bureaucracy. But there have just been big protests against ULEZ. It almost seems like for Londoners, this is a straw that is now breaking the camel's back. They can't cope with it any longer. London did not have a good pandemic. You know, it's a city. There were a lot of people in flats and who didn't have gardens, and the fact that the sun was shining. It was very nice if you were in the countryside for some people and suddenly you got paid for not working at all. But in London it was different, and now they're having to pay £12.50 every single day, in many cases, to run their business. Many people have already seen their businesses fail because of this, and now these protests are starting up. I think I think a general spirit of rebellion it's simmering there, and I don't know what the reaction will be if there's a serious attempt at another COVID variant pandemic emergency.
I meet a lot of people randomly, not at freedom events. I'm traveling, right? And I'm alone. So I'm quite approachable in that way. So I speak to a lot of people.
Have you noticed a sort of ground-based increasing resentment in other countries?
I tell you what I talk about a lot is the cash thing, because the whole keep cash alive concept, it hasn't been radicalized yet. It's not a right-wing conspiracy theory yet labeled, I mean. So this is a really good topic to talk with people. No one has ever disagreed with me on this topic. You know, people might disagree on climate change or vaccines, but no one can deny that keeping cash alive is important. So I think this is a really great way of connecting with everyday people. But what I find is that people agree, and then I go to say something like, yeah, because, you know, you don't really want the government knowing everything that you say. And they're like, yeah, you know, because the government's, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so, yes, there is definitely a sense of distrust.
We take this very seriously. It's a great shame. I've got a sort of second in command who couldn't be here tonight, but his name's Keith, and as a sort of offshoot of the free speech part of our group, he is actually running something called Keep It Cash Cardiff, and he's been out with the stall and the banner and the leaflets and so on. But I will tell you also what is very heartening at the moment. And I would be interested to hear if this is if you've come across this in your tours of other countries. I run a small business selling homemade sweets and things at food festivals, and the last 4 or 5 that I've been to, I say to customers, I've got a machine, but if you've got cash, it's quicker, simpler. And so many people have turned around and said, oh, no, cash. We want to use cash. And they even explain why. They say, oh, cash is king. We must keep cash. We have to keep cash alive. These are extremely ordinary members of the public wandering around who do not look like activists. They don't look like activists. They don't look like people who even probably bother coming to meetings like this. They're just wandering around in rural Wales, buying a bag of sweets, but they want to pay cash for it, which I think is marvelous.
I'll agree with you. I got from the ferry from France to from Calais to wherever, and first 2 shops I went to, the people in front of me paid cash. And I've noticed in the UK, I've got to say, you guys are definitely leading the way with cash. I've definitely seen the most people using cash that I've seen anywhere. And so that's really encouraging, because now why use cash? I didn't really know exactly why. I thought, oh, it's just better. You're obviously saving on transaction fees and the government can't track where you're spending. That makes sense. But Catherine Austin Fitts made a really good point. Catherine Austin Fitts, some people would. She's an investment banker from America, and she talks a lot about these things. But she says the more cash that is in circulation, the harder it is for them to bring in the digital currencies and digital ID. So if every time you pay cash, you imagine that you're actually helping to prevent this, it's a very empowering experience, especially when you have the exact change. I don't know why, but there's something really empowering. You're just like, there you go, and you walk off. Sometimes I've even gotten discounts, or even I've gotten free stuff for using cash. Or like, for example, Airbnb, instead of booking through the Airbnb, I get the name and I call them and I say how much for cash, and they give me a £30 discount for paying with cash. So if you just ask that question, you often get a discount. Now I don't have them here, but on my website, I have this little printout, and you might be similar to your friends, but there's 10 to a page and they're very small, and you just put them in your wallet. And so you cut them into 10. So it's really cheap to print. And it just has 4 really easy dot points on why it's important to keep cash alive. And people, when you pay with cash, you just give them a little piece of paper and you just leave it there and you walk away. I've never had a bad experience. And I have these little stickers. They were supposed to be bigger. They're supposed to be for cars. So someone would have to go pretty close to read them.
We'll give all those out.
Yeah.
At the end.
Yeah. Anyway.
Can we go back a bit to your personal story, because there were some really interesting bits in it as well, and then we'll do questions afterwards. But you did talk about backfiring, and there was one particularly gratifying aspect to your stay in prison. Didn't you get quite a lot of donations and subscriptions and things.
Yeah, I mean, it's why I'm here.
Wasn't
So,
it something incredible? Like,
yeah.
what was the sum?
It was a lot. It was a lot. It was a lot. And that's why I'm able to now sue them back. So I haven't started because I only finished my court cases before I left for Europe. So now what they do is they always withdraw at the last minute. You would have seen that with Stan and Dan too, if you guys know from voiceover. They process by punishment. But when you're suing them, they can't withdraw. Only you can. So the donations that I got for the legal fund is enabling me to do that. We also, because of that fund, we hired 2 lawyers with that fund, which I probably shouldn't have done because I didn't know how much legal things actually costed. But that's beside the point. We hired 2 lawyers full time and gave free legal advice for a year and a half. And we got people payouts from the Fair Work Commission, which is when they got fired for not taking the vaccine, of up to $45,000, all for free. And the amazing thing is that the opposition to the lawyer had nowhere to go because he knew that the lawyer was free. Usually, if they know that the other person is a regular person and they're having to pay for their legal fees, they'll just like prolong things and make it longer and make it difficult, but because they knew that their lawyer was free, they couldn't do anything. So that was really amazing. So I used the money for that. Yeah.
Did it make your stay in prison, did that reconcile you to the non-ensuite experience?
Oh, I was fine. I was fine in prison, honestly. I was fine. I obviously went, but just before I made the decision not to sign the bail conditions. I mean, there's a bit of a weird story. 3 days before I got arrested, I had a dream that I got arrested and I didn't sign bail conditions and I went to prison. There's like different imagery, but exactly the same scenario. It was so vivid that I told my family and I told my boyfriend at the time, I said, if I get arrested and get given bad bail conditions, I'm not going to sign them. He said, so you'll go to prison? And I said, if I have to. 3 days later, got arrested. That's why I was so calm, because I was like, oh,
you felt
God prepared me for
this.
Did
you actually have deja vu?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, I was like, oh.
You actually had a premonition. That's
yeah,
amazing.
I did. I had a premonition. But also the night before, I'm a believer in God, obviously, but not obviously, but I am, that the night before the bail hearing, so I was in remand, which was really uncomfortable because it was cold and whatever. And there was another woman in the other cell. And I couldn't see her or anything, but I could just hear her. And she was screaming all night long. I mean, the only thing you want to do is sleep, right? Because you want the day to be over, right? And I was like, okay, I'll just sleep and then it will be over. But she was screaming and squealing as if she was a devil. I imagined that she was the devil, telling me that you can't do this. Who do you think you are? You're just you're just a girl and you can't say no, you can't do it, blah, blah, blah. And I was literally like not yelling, but I was talking through the door like, yes, I can do this. I've been prepared for this. And then the other thing was, you just want to be a hero. You want to be a martyr. You want to show off that you're strong and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I'm doing it for the right reasons. I'm doing it to make a stand, So I was having these arguments with this crazy devil woman.
Did you know that you would be accused of those things?
I know, because it had happened before to other people with the bail conditions, and they
so
had signed them.
That you would be
I knew
of these things.
no, it was I knew the bail conditions would be so bad that I wouldn't be able to sign them, because it had happened to people before me who had signed them and then had to close down their social media and stuff. So it was that's why I had that dream. It was quite predicted. Also because I had stopped using the loophole of journalism and I had just started posting.
Did you have to face any accusations? I just asked because it would have been an obvious way of getting at you. But were you accused of voluntarily incarcerating yourself?
Oh, yeah,
you could have signed the bail conditions at any moment.
I could have worn a mask. I could have gotten the vaccine too if I wanted to.
Yeah,
but you draw these lines in the sand.
Was that a main attack?
Oh, from people who already hated me. Yeah.
Right.
So that they'll say, you didn't go to jail. You chose to go to jail. But I'm sorry, there was never a choice for me. You want me to fire 8 people and let go of my integrity when that's literally what I've been fighting for? There's no question. There was no choice. Right. There was no choice.
I'm going to jump around with a couple of questions, just because we've got a limited amount of time, and there was a couple that it struck me. It would be really interesting to hear from someone on the other side of the hemisphere. We seem to be moving seamlessly from one emergency to another. We've had the pandemic. It seems as if that hasn't quite achieved the trick that the authorities completely wanted to achieve. So they're going to go for a new thing now, and it's mostly climate change.
Climate boiling.
The world is on fire. In Australia, just out of interest, have you seen a subtle change in the way that the weather forecast graphics have changed? Because we saw some extraordinary graphics.
I know what you're saying.
Summer.
It's gotten colder where I live, so I don't know what that's what. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. They just make it red and stuff like that. Yeah, and apparently the only way we can fix the climate crisis is to pay more tax. That's what our prime minister recently said.
Pay more tax.
Pay more tax, and the climate will fix itself. Yeah.
Which tax would this be then?
Oh, I don't know. Just another tax.
Any tax.
You know, you look at the £12.50 for driving your bloody car. You know.
And I wonder, I mean, the climate change, the thing about the climate change emergencies, all these things, they can sort of start blurring together, but it's like the climate change emergency is now spawning sort of smaller secondary emergencies. The climate emergency is leading to a farming emergency, which is why various countries, there have been attempts to confiscate farmers' lands in, I think it's Netherlands, Ireland,
Canada,
a few others. And there's also an energy crisis, which is down to the climate as well. There wouldn't be an energy crisis if you could continue using fossil fuels, or at least make a more reasonable transition, for example. One thing that seems to be coming up over and over with all these secondary crises for us is freedom of movement. There's a lot of talk about 15-minute cities, which basically means encouraging people to stay within a very small radius, to not travel more than it takes 15 minutes to go anywhere in their little town or village. And as I mentioned before, you know, the ULEZ, the ultra low emissions, and just so you know, we have just had all these protests. It was only a few days ago that the Mayor of London shelved, he actually had plans for not ULEZ, but ZES, zero emission zones, which means no cars at all. I don't know if that's really come up much, but that was actually only shelved. The plans for that he actually tossed out a few days ago because ULEZ was causing so much upset. Was there much restriction, or have you, since the pandemic lockdown, have you seen many attempts to cut down on freedom of movement?
Well, not attempts, but it's the same as everywhere. This is a one world government situation here. So anything that's happening here, you can guess
they're all linked.
It's happening the same. Well, of course, it's not hard to see that. But yeah, so of course the talk about the 15 minutes, but when you go on the 15-minute cities website in Victoria, it looks fantastic. So as in, they make it sound so good that it's like I said, because people aren't totally awake, those people aren't totally awake, they'll look at that website and say, that sounds great. I can walk everywhere, you know. So you can't wake someone up with a website like that. You have to wait until it happens and then be like, hey, look, you can't go hiking. You can't go see your grandma. You can't go see your auntie. And then they'll be like, oh my gosh, you were right. So I say, I can't wait for 15-minute cities.
You're just wanting
I'm just
boiling
ready.
point to actually.
Well, because the lull is actually part of the punishment too. So we were like fight, and then now it's kind of like we're kind of in this holding pattern. And this is a strategy, by the way. They do this. They go hard, they let go a little bit, then they go harder, then they let go a bit, then they go harder. So it's only a matter of time until the harder comes. So that's why I'm saying to live our lives while we can, have fun, relax, enjoy a little bit while we can. Waiting for 15-minute cities, and then we go guerrilla style.
I don't want you to give away your secret strategies, but
I already have.
Do you have a plan in place for when the second boiling point is reached? I mean, what's a vague outline of the approach that you would be taking?
No, I have no idea. No. I had no idea back then either. So I believe in God and I pray about a lot of things. And so I just do it as I come. You can work yourself into a frenzy planning too much as well. And you end up watching all this stuff and you get a bit black pilled, and then you see everything as corruption. And to be honest, it takes away from your present. You know, we still have children and nieces and nephews and families and stuff like that. So I would say limit actually the amount of, you know, involvement you have in everything. Keep it to a minimum unless you can do something about it. If you have some influence or you have some connections that you can actually use to do something, great. But if you can't do anything about it, it's not really worth spending 10 hours watching all this doom and gloom when you can't do anything about it. It's just wasting your present life. It's stealing from your present life. So I don't have a plan, but what I know is that people are so ready for this. Like, when I say ready, I don't mean we're physically necessarily ready with all the veggie gardens and all the, you know, bulletproof windows, or I don't know, but we are ready here because we're ready. Our line has gotten a lot closer.
How do you mean veggie gardens?
Well, I mean, like, if everything goes into full lockdown, like draconian mode, and we can't buy things without having a digital ID, for example, I don't have enough food in the back of my car to survive for 2 months, you know, but I will go to the bush and I will eat this. That is the only time I would eat slugs, you know, and, you know, and if I get sick in the process, so be it, you know, like, we'll figure it out, you know. Humans are, look at what our ancestors did to fight for freedom. Hey, you know, like, they died in prison. They didn't get a bathroom and a shower like I did. It was like we actually are doing okay. And what we achieved during COVID, we should be very proud of ourselves. A lot of us, we found new friends, we found new, you know, but we're still trying to get bigger. It's like, we should actually be happy with what we achieved and just wait for the next time. And then we'll achieve more and more again, instead of working ourselves into a frenzy.
I think it's absolutely fabulous to have, you know, such a positive speaker. I'm going to be very British.
Yeah, you can't
now.
get me negative. It's hard. It's hard, but you can try.
I'm not actually English myself. I am Welsh, but I'm going to be very British and do that thing of sort of pulling back slightly and saying, oh, well, yes, you know, these are all very fine words, of course. But I do have one question. Actually, I'm going to ask the people in the room, just going back to the idea of cash as king, because I think this is quite interesting. Is there anyone here in the room who has become much more sympathetic to entrepreneurs since the whole lockdown began? All this talk about, you know, we've heard so much about small restaurants, small bars, small businesses, the small businesses getting clobbered by the ULEZ tax in London. Is there anyone now who now feels more sympathetic towards small businesses than they did before? That's 1, 2, 3, 4.
We probably all liked small
About a
business.
third.
No, probably because they already supported small business, right?
Because they're used to
more so, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, there used to be a feeling. I think there was. I remember being very surprised a few years ago when there was a program on the radio where some talking about small businesses, and so many people rang in to say, "Oh, small businesses, they're all shoving cash in their back pocket and they're not paying enough taxes."
So
that seems to, well, yeah, I found that surprising. Maybe it was just that one program was a bit skewed or something.
Yeah.
But as a small business person myself, I remember being, oh, I really didn't realise that people felt that badly about us. But that seems to have gone down now. So perhaps there's a bit more unity there. I don't know, for the general population, for small.
I think so. People are willing to spend a little bit more, you know, to get the same thing, I think.
Or perhaps
or depending on how much money they have.
As the idea of, you know, the man, the big authority, the big bureaucracy, the big company, the big pharma, obviously, as resentment of that has increased, the resentment against small businesses has sort of gone away in comparison. I mean,
I hope so.
That would be great if so.
Conveniences are killing us. We need to really make better decisions on what we do with our money and stuff. Definitely.
So does anybody have any questions for Monica? Like I said, it's all been up. you're so upbeat about all this.
And I was arrested and strip searched and asked to like spread my bits. So if I can be positive, then surely.
Have you got any views? I mean, I was just talking with the gentleman outside, so you may have covered it because we've got to do our own little discussion. Have you got any views on what I think quite sinister is the way three big organisations, Vanguard,
BlackRock,
and the other one, I forget them, which is something.
Yeah.
It's the third one, they're not quite so big. The way they seem to control governments now, so governments are not really in charge.
No.
Is this to do with blockchain or finances or something? What?
No, it's just these three companies, they own everything from media to Amazon to Facebook.
It's why you've got no polarity in the British media, Sky and the BBC and ITV.
They're all owned by the same
people.
They're
all the same thing, and that's same in America.
Everywhere.
Fox is probably in it.
Everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of let it happen in a way, like not my generation.
Yeah. No,
but your generation.
Well, it's like Bill Gates that owns in
he
got shares, they got shares, and no one knows who owns.
The problem is that people say, well, I'm just going to buy this $5 product from Amazon because it's half the price and I'm just one person, so it doesn't matter. That's the problem.
Yeah.
That is the problem. No offense, but you're not just one person. And if we stand up for what we stand up for, we have to walk the walk. And I think somehow if we got enough people to believe in that, then it would hurt those companies and they would lose some of their control. But when it comes to the government control, have you heard the saying, politics is downstream of culture? So I really like that saying, and it sounds fairy tale-ish, but what I think that means is that politicians actually have no spine, generally speaking. So they'll actually follow what is the in vogue thing. Now, it is currently in vogue for them to be on the narrative, right? But if we become the cool kids in the schoolyard, for example, politicians would actually automatically change because they're spineless. Yeah. Right now, they are totally manipulated by those companies. You know what I mean? So we need to change as it sounds wishy-washy, but we need to change as a collective society in order for politics to actually start working for us again. I don't know.
I agree with Peter.
I don't know when that's going to happen.
He said our two big parties are rotting corpses, and we need.
They should be individuals.
And we need to have.
The only way to get democracy back, in my opinion, and I'm not a political expert here, but there should be no parties. There should just be individuals, and they should have to campaign to get the votes from the people. Was it in this conversation? No, it was in Victoria. There is legalized corruption in politics, and what that means is it's legal for them to swap preferences. I'm not going to go into it because it's very complex, but let me tell you the outcome. The best case I have is that one politician got elected on 0.6% of the vote. Okay.
Ow.
There were people who got 20%, 30% of the vote. They didn't get elected. The person with 0.6 got elected because of the preference deals and it's all legal. That's not democracy. Now, this guy who got elected, he's literally going to work knowing that no one wanted him there. And he's there anyway. How embarrassing is that?
Actually,
it's just unbelievable.
We do have this guy called Rishi Sunak who absolutely nobody voted for.
How did he get in then?
Not in his party, not in the general public, not in Parliament, I think. And he's our Prime Minister.
Yeah, well, our Prime Minister only got his party only got 34% of the vote, which is not a majority.
0.6% is more than our Prime Minister has ever got, ever.
Yeah,
point that out.
I think what was the point? What was the point is though, is that what was the point?
Well, it's getting back because it's this. I'm not sure I personally share your optimism. I know I'm wrong,
fair enough.
But it's almost not that we've lost the battle, but I don't quite know where you take the battle to. It's these big. I mean, the reason to pick up on cats, the reason we got the powers that be didn't want the woman who was voted in, which was Liz Truss.
Yeah.
And they completely destabilized the whole exchange market, and there was a bump, and then she was gone within 40 odd days.
Yeah.
Just for the benefit of the people online, I'm just going to repeat that a bit. I think saying there has been a failure of democracy in the UK. We do have a Prime Minister that doesn't appear to have won any elections ever, apart from ages and ages ago when he was elected as a normal MP. And obviously that's a problem. As I was saying, he didn't even get 0.6% in his efforts to become Prime Minister, but he's still Prime Minister. So I said at the beginning that I was hoping this meeting might provide some answers. I'm going to come back to the audience again, but I'm just going to put this while everybody else thinks of the question. Do you have any top tips for us as a small organisation and for joining up with other small groups? I mean, how did you grow your organisation?
With action. So, you know, like for example,
sorry, it's me again.
It is.
I tell you what, Louise. Should we take your question now?
Yeah, well, it's not really.
And then we won't hear the occasional squawks from the laptop.
Yeah, telling my husband to put wine back in the fridge. It's not really a question. I'm seething here. We have a Prime Minister with a personal wealth of 480 million, telling the rest of us how to live our lives. I'm a county councillor. I'm an elected pain in the arse. I'm on the bottom rung of the political ladder, and I haven't been able to get up the greasy pole because I have principles and I have integrity. I won't join the mutual back scratching club. You know, you get me planning permission, I'll make sure you get the chair of that committee. And the higher up you go.
Hold on for 1 second, Louise. Can everyone in the room actually hear Louise? Okay, so I don't need to repeat it. Okay, so carry on.
So I've been a councillor since 2008. I am an elected pain in the arse. I challenge, I question, I rock the boat. I do it politely and with courtesy, but they don't like me. They're trying to silence me here in the People's Republic of Gwynedd, where Plaid Cymru are the main party, and you have to fit in. Well, I don't fit in, and I won't fit in. I've already been silenced once. I've been banished with no pay for a month.
Have we got a question, Louise?
Yeah, okay, my question is...
Louise has had a traumatic time recently. We won't go into now, but... Have we got a question?
Yeah, you were charged with incitement, but incitement to what? You know,
inciting people to break COVID restrictions.
Whoopee-doo. I mean, we all trudged like zombies around the supermarkets following the bloody arrows, didn't we? There was a chap in Bangor who was arrested. He wanted to buy his child a winter coat, and he ripped down all those stupid bits of plastic they'd put up everywhere. You cannot buy a coat. You could buy a toaster, but you couldn't buy a kettle, or you could buy a book, but you could. It was ridiculous. And if they do it again, well, sod them. We had a 5-mile radius here where I live.
Thank you.
Sod them. I think you got to clap. You got to clap.
You got to clap, Louise. I think that was
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Said it better than I did. Good job.
Yeah, I will just add on. I will add on to what Louise says, because this was actually. Tell me if this happened in Australia, because this was actually one of the most.
Can I pause that for 1 second, because you asked the question, I didn't get to answer it, which was, do you have some tips for small grassroots sort of?
Yes,
and that's really important, because I do. Yeah. And you want to do things that make you feel good. Okay. Now, even if it doesn't necessarily change the world, if you feel good about it, that is something, because it makes you stronger and it makes you more courageous. So the way that I encouraged people to stay in groups and things like that was to give them things to do. So letterbox drops, for example, which is putting things into letterboxes, for example, okay, or standing on the corner with a small piece of a small thing or something like that. But also keeping up regular catch-ups as well, because you want to actually get to know these small groups. Now, imagine that every time you catch up with a small group, you're actually pushing back against globalism, because they hate it when people catch up together. They hate this. They know how powerful it is, because there's no such thing as an original idea, okay? Ideas all come from like every single conversation you have. That's why I'm doing this tour, so that I can amalgamate in my head. In a year's time, I might come up with a campaign that someone said something here. Like, if you think you have original ideas, you're an idiot. You don't. You have to meet people and you have to have these groups. That's why they don't want us to meet up. So every time you meet up like this, every time you go for a walk and you talk about politics and you talk about the world, you're actually directly pushing back against globalism, because you're doing exactly what they don't want you to do. So my tips are to maintain community groups as much as you can, even if it seems pointless, because it won't seem important to you until you need it. It's like having, I would love a taser, but I can't find one. For example, if you have a taser, you don't want to use it. But if you need to, you're glad you've got it. The point is, your community groups, you don't need them until you do. And then you're going to be glad you made those networks. Find out where you can get organic meat from, organic vegetables from. Make those connections. Have a meeting point if there's a blackout or things like that. These are practical things that small groups can do, and it keeps you united. Now, also, don't be disheartened if less people are watching or less people are commenting. It's only because they're actually living their lives while we're still stressing about things. But when things get bad, they're going to look to you for support. All those people who were quiet before are going to need your encouragement when things go bad. And the people that are asleep now and who are going to wake up, because a lot of people will, they're going to need us to help them, because they're going to feel really bad about what they did to us and to each other and to society. So my point is keep the groups going, keep doing these sorts of things, and do letterbox drops and do things that empower you and make you feel like you're contributing, even if you're not. Because if you go home and you feel like you might have changed one person's life, that's a pretty good way to go to sleep at night. So I say do that.
Thanks. That's actually really really helpful.
Okay.
I mean, we started off quite slowly, this group, because I will say this: one of our most trusted helpers, the Free Speech Union in London, who did help us to set up, advised us very strongly not to advertise, not to go on Twitter, not to do this, not to do that, because the potential for huge backlashes was just so potentially destructive. You know, you don't want to be in a position where, for example, we might have people crowding around outside this venue.
That'd be great.
Making really
everything is a chance to grow. Every time that happens, you would get more members. Aside
from annoying the hotel manager, I would agree with you.
Okay.
But there are some practicalities. So we made the decision a while ago that actually we were going to stop taking that quite so seriously, because we can't do everything by word of mouth. And I'll tell you why. I don't know if this rings a bell with you, but so many people in our group, as a free speech group, what we find is that people will join and say something like, "It's so wonderful, I found this job at last, people I can talk to, I can't talk to my friends or family." So growing by word of mouth is actually incredibly difficult. People can't invite their friends, people can't invite their family. Half the time they're pretending they're not here when they are, because most people, given the choice between coming to the free speech group and openly and destroying their social base, will choose not to destroy their social base. I mean, it's very, very understandable. I don't know. Did you find this with your group, or did you find word of mouth actually worked for you?
No, I say everything out loud, so I learned a little bit.
Oh, you do, but what about the people? What about the Australians? Because this is interesting.
Well, you know,
I don't know if this is a British
thing. It depends on how big you want to be, and it depends on what your mission is. If you want to create 10 people in your local village that can support each other, then you shouldn't be online. Obviously, you know. You should have walkie-talkies, and you should have that, and there are those groups in Australia too, you know. But if you want to be a big voice and blah blah blah, then you need to use some of those tools too. And I mean, you know, you could throw the net really wide and get infiltrators and get lefties coming to destruct you and stuff like that, but with that wide net you also get more people. So you have to decide, am I willing to deal with the infiltrators and the negativity to get the more people? Or do I want 30 really good quality people who I know, who I could stay at their house, who I would go to their weddings. You know, it's really about what you want. But there is almost no such thing as bad publicity in a lot of ways. And if you get cancelled at a venue, for example, great opportunity to grow. But it's only if you can handle it and if that's what you want to do.
We actually put the address of this event on Twitter, and I sent you a graphic which had, for some reason it was okay when I put it up, but when I saw your Twitter feed with the address, I thought, oh God, please don't let there be some sort of awful thing happening.
In Australia, they never leave the house. I've never been confronted on the streets ever.
Right. It's different.
It's different here, I hear. I think
because we're a free speech group, we always seem, very often we come back to the transgender issue because that is specifically the movement that tried to ban forms of free speech from the very beginning. You know, you can't have a debate, you cannot question whether a person is trans, you must not say this, you cannot say that. It's quite a unique thing, the trans movement here. And the trans movement is also quite unique in that it seems very willing to use very unpleasant tactics. You will, if you say, if you get picked on by them, we've all seen it on telly and so on, you will get a crowd of very unpleasant people turning up and being very threatening, which is ridiculous because as a free speech group, we would be the first, if a trans person wanted to come along, I would sit here and talk to them exactly as I'm talking to you. We know that they would never accept that invitation, but that's
we have lots of transgender people in the freedom movement in Australia, and in the anti, children grooming protest. There's lots of transgenders.
We could try reaching out to them, but I honestly think that it would cause an enormous.
I don't think the topic is actually. It's actually if you indulge too much in that topic, I actually think you're bringing down your IQ a little bit because it's not even a discussion. It's not even a discussion.
I have got one more question, which will be my final question. But before I ask that, is there anything that anybody else in the room?
It's been a while.
Okay, Ben, would you like? It's been so fascinating.
Yeah. Oh, good.
It's been so inspiring, actually. We don't do the whoop whoop and the American thing, but this is what a bunch of British people look like when they're actually really enthused.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Although I'm not a good example of what Catherine has mentioned, I'm a Pole.
But okay.
But I've been here long enough to even support Brexit and have switched to ale from lager, so yeah, I feel half British. Anyway, first of all, you're a star, and it's amazing to listen to you, to meet you. You send so much energy, and I'm a bit of an old-fashioned, enlightened sexist, but I feel frustrated again that women, as happens most of the time in my life, turn out to be superior to men, and not only that, they seem to very often have bigger balls than men. So respect.
Hey, there's a time when I'm gonna step back.
Yes, so it's time to psych us up for that, because men will need to step in at some point.
Absolutely.
Yes, to do when brave women might temporarily go on holiday. But anyway, one thing that made me smile when you were talking about what you went through was, and I know you meant it as a personal situation, when you start compromising your integrity and going from one drug deal to another, I couldn't help but smile because that reminded me of the COVID situation and the vaccine and the government, one drug deal.
Yeah, good point.
So that was very nice. Funny, not nice. But my question is this. I feel that a bigger issue, a more energizing issue to defend freedom and to defend civilization, to make it more specific, Western, but I believe generally civilization, are not the economic aspects, which are very important. Cash, absolutely. Economic freedom, less intervention, less socialism. I'm a libertarian. But I feel at the moment these are the moral issues to do with family, sex, marriage, and even if you think the stress should be on cash, which denominator, but it's not the lowest. It's like a lower denominator. I think we should go for something more spiritual, even if you forget religion, more, you know, more human. And I think family is the main thing. If you agreed with me, what would be your tip how to do it best in Britain or internationally when you talk about Western civilization, or at least the English-speaking countries? What would be the biggest campaign you can think of? Because I'm working on one myself. I want your tips because you sound like you know, the right person to ask this.
I'm obviously not. It's not the. It's a topic I'm very passionate about, and I would love to have children and get married. I was engaged a year ago, so I am all about that. And I've been engaged twice, actually, didn't work out. So it's not like I've chosen to forego that for my career. And I hope that God gives me both one day, but I'm running out of time. But I definitely agree with you. The first thing that comes to my head would be to be proud of being heterosexual and be proud of wanting to have children. And, you know, if families have to move out of the city in order to afford to live so that the mum doesn't work, then I think that's beautiful. And I think we should be homeschooling our children. I don't know how you can be one of us and send your children to a state school. I don't know. I know I don't have children, so it's hard. It's easy for me to say, but one day they will come home and they won't be the same kid. So I guess I would say that people need to make sacrifices to be better parents, probably. But I also think in the same, I mean, we could have rallies for heterosexual pride if we wanted, but that would just like annoy people and it really wouldn't get anywhere. Honestly, my answer is that probably God's going to have to intervene at some point and just be like, okay, you guys have just really stuffed things up, and there's probably going to have to be a spiritual situation. The propaganda is just too heavy. I don't really know. Someone did say to me, they're like, Monica, if you want to stop globalism, have children. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I need to fall in love first, you know. Usually that's the best way to do things. But
Sometimes
anyway,
you just have to wait.
I'd like to talk to you about your campaign after.
Because probably I wasn't specific enough.
Probably.
I meant more the freedom to say that I believe a family, the
Okay.
family is a man and a woman.
I can answer this.
Not to have one, not to make like
Okay.
a religious campaign. Yeah, you should get married, you should have children. But at least you should be able to say family is man and a woman.
Okay.
A woman cannot just arbitrarily say I'm a man suddenly, or I can criticize that. It's more free speech.
Yeah. My answer is speak about it more.
Okay.
And stop justifying yourself. For example, you notice, like, I'm going to make a video when I leave the UK talking about the immigration problem. And before I realized this about 3 days ago, I would have started the video with I'm not a racist, but, right? Why the hell should I have to justify what I'm already not? So instead of starting your conversation with, I'm not a bigot, but I believe men and women should be married, just say what you want to say. Don't justify it. Don't start with, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but, you know, just say what you want to say. We self-censor ourselves. And the best remedy for that is to practice saying what you believe. And it gets easier as time goes on. It's pretty simple.
You couldn't actually put much better. I mean, as free speech group, that would be very much what we're about.
Stop self-censoring. That's a big one.
Say if you say what you see, then you won't go too far wrong.
And don't justify it.
And yeah, why would you need to?
Yeah.
My final question was just, we are a small free speech group. Is there any particular issue that you could identify that you think would be the best thing for us to focus on? Here in Wales, it's a small place. I know you're not very familiar with it, but is there anything that immediately leaps to mind?
Well, free speech. I mean, if you came up with a really clever flyer that just asks questions without answering them, I think that's really cool to make people think, like,
just ask questions, because then people have to think.
They have to think.
They have
and
to think.
Oh, free speech. Well, sharing stories about people who have been imprisoned for their speech. I mean, case in point.
Those are the best stories.
That's case in point. Like, I literally got put in prison because of my website speaking against the government. And whenever if I meet people and I'm like, yeah, you know, I went to prison, like, what? You know, because I look so, you know, like, if there's nothing wrong with tattoos or anything, but like, if I was full of tattoos and I had earrings out of my nose and stuff, and I said I went to prison, no one would really bat an eyelid. But when I say it, it's really good. So I think find other people that have been you know, intimidated because of their freedom of speech. But also just, I mean, one of the campaigns I would like to do, and maybe you guys can do it, and then the rest of the world can do it too, is stand up on a soapbox in a public place. It's going to take a very special human. Even I would be scared, totally scared to do this, but have 20 questions. Questions like, for example, have you ever considered that the pharmaceutical country needs you to be sick? Have you ever considered that prisons need prisoners? Have you, you know, really kind of like, you know, thought-provoking questions, but never answer them. So you ask these questions on repeat, and you stand on your soapbox and you just say the questions. People will come at you and they'll try to get you to answer them or something, but you just stand there very plain and just ask the questions. I would like to test it out, but I think it would be a really fantastic campaign globally.
One of our members actually does want
Take a lot of guts.
to have a trial, a sort of speaker's corner within
That's exactly what it is.
within Wales. Ideally,
It has to be public.
near a university, because
Yes.
that would have a benefit as well.
You do that and take a video,
and
I will make a global campaign out of it.
Okay.
I'm not joking.
Ben?
We need 20 questions, but they need to be very intelligent. They need to be extremely well written. I don't know exactly, you know, but someone in Norway told me this idea. And this is why I'm doing this tour, is to get little ideas from people. He told me he's always had a dream of doing this. And I said, how about we make it questions without answers? And he's like,
Questions
yeah.
without
And he's like, you're never really going to do this, are you? And I'm like, yes, I will. Just you wait. Maybe in a year, maybe in a year and a half.
Questions.
So now you're going to do it.
Questions without answers on a soapbox near a university.
Who can discredit you if you don't respond? You can't respond to anyone in the audience. That has got to be the power. You're just asking questions. You could even throw in a few questions that make it seem like you're not biased to one side, and you could confuse people.
Very clever. Right, I think that's nearly 2 hours that Monica's been talking to. I have to say, it doesn't feel like 2 hours.
It might feel like 2 hours for them, though.
But I think Monica's been absolutely inspiring.
Oh. Can I do my little ending? So
if you'd like to do
my ending messages is
absolutely.
Keep your community groups going, and we are ready. Even if we have to fake it, just believe it. Okay, so I have a few things to show you guys. So I've got these stickers. They're smaller than they were supposed to be. But the other thing is, I believe that the freedom movement needs a flag that is not just a country flag, but it can't be a logo or a face or anyone else's. It has to be something super generic that isn't patentable or anything like that. And so I really think that this should be our flag. So it's just very basic. I mean, I was going to have some words and stuff like that, but that just, it's freedom is different for everyone.
How many graphic designers did you run through to get to that?
Just mine, just me. That's the thing.
Red line around it.
No, it has to be basic, and it has to be black and white. If you bring in a color, they're going to say, oh, that's the color of communism, or that's the color of whatever. So black and white, right? Anyway, so you guys can have these stickers. You can have one of each, even though this one you'll be able to see on the car. Put this on